Welcome to the preview of the semifinal for the MLSisback tournament. Now, since there's only two games to preview, this should relatively be a quick video, and that I'm not going to do timestamp in this video because just like what I said in the preview for the quarterfinal of this tournament, since I only get to look at two games, I don't really need to do a timestamp. And then if you want to hear this game, which I know this one is probably the more anticipated semifinal fixture compared to this one, then probably skip maybe 3 or 4 minutes ahead when I talk about Minnesota versus Orlando City, also known as the Adrian Heath Derby. But first of all, let's talk about the first match of this semifinal, which is going to be taking place tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. I didn't put the time for both of these games because they pretty much kick off at the same time. The only difference is this one kicks off on Wednesday, and that one, the Adrian Heath Derby, kicks off on Thursday, and both of them kicks off around the same time. Now, in this game between the Union versus the Portland Timbers, both of these teams came off a 3-1 win against their opponent in the quarterfinal. The Union won 3-1 against SKC in the quarterfinal, while the Portland Timbers won 3-1 against NYCFC in the quarterfinal. In the last 5 head-to-head matchup, it was the Timbers getting a 3-1 road win against the Union. Then they got a 3-0 home win against the Union before getting another 3-1 away win against the Union. And then a 2-1 win against the Union at home before the Union were able to win 3-0 against the Portland Timbers. And in fact, when I look at the all-time series between both of these teams, this match between the Union and the Portland Timbers, which the Union won 3-0, is the only game that the Union has been able to beat the Portland Timbers, and that the Timbers definitely have the upper hand in terms of the all-time series, and that most of these games, when both of these teams face off each other, has been in favor of the Portland Timbers. But despite that, I feel like this might be one of the more unpredictable game between these two teams in this fixture, and that if you expect to see goals in this game and a ton of crazy action that is going to be happening in this one, well, I sadly had to say that is probably not going to happen, because it seemed like when you look at how both of these teams have made it to the semifinal, not many of their matches so far in the tournament between both of these teams have been actually crazy and filled with goals. I mean, the only game that I can recall from both of these teams that kind of had something crazy happening was that game between the Timbers and FC Cincinnati, and even that, the Timbers kind of had themselves to blame to make it a little bit crazy because of that Steve Clark howler that happened that allowed Cincinnati back in the game, and they were literally on the doorstep of not even making into the quarterfinal, but they were able to win that penalty kick shootout to move on into the quarterfinal and then move on into the semifinal. Whereas the Union, I feel like most of the games that they've been in right now has been just kind of a very grind kind of resort that they have got to this point, and that a lot of these games haven't been a lot of high scoring game, and that they just do enough in terms of getting the 3 points and move on into the next round. And when you're in a knockout stage like this, that is actually a good recipe in terms of making it to the final and winning this tournament, because you don't have to play the prettiest soccer and you don't have to be like LAFC, and that is like a free scoring kind of team. But if you're able to get the result and you pick the right moment, which the Union, time and time again throughout this tournament, they have picked the right moment to score their goals and able to do that to win the game. And not to also mention the fact that their defense have probably been the best defense in this tournament, and that if you look at all 4 of these teams and you could say who has the best defense, I am going to give the upper edge to the Union, even though I know some people would argue the Loons actually have a better defense in terms of the way how they're played. But I feel like the Union has a better defense because I think throughout all of the games that they've been playing right now, they have not conceded more than 1 goal. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Andre Blake has really been on candidate of winning goalkeeper of this tournament. If there was an award that is going to be awarded that, and it seemed like he has rediscovered his 2018 form, being one of the best goalkeeper in this league. Now, that being said, they're on the opposite side. The Portland Timbers also have a decent goalkeeper in Steve Clark, and if you just forget about what happened in that FC Cincinnati game, he's also been very rock solid. But one guy I want to mention of why the Portland Timbers is in this stage has to be Sebastian Blanco. Like, Blanco, if the Timbers does win in this tournament, he's got to be the MVP of this tournament. I mean, he has single-handedly just carried this team on the offensive end and kind of almost did a Diego Valeri kind of duty right now with the way that he's pretty much involved in almost every single goals that the Portland Timbers have scored in this tournament, and I won't be surprised if the Timbers are going to score in this game. He's going to be either on the assist chart or on the goal scoring chart because of how well he's been playing in this tournament. But with that being said, in terms of the prediction for this, I am going to go with the Portland Timbers on this. And again, I won't be surprised if I get this one wrong because, again, there's really not much separate between both of these teams, and that this should definitely be a tight kind of fixture. Although, that being said, I said that before in previews, and look what happened in terms of when I thought that a game is going to be very tight, and it turns out one of the team is able to grab the game by the stuff of their neck and able to win big in that fixture. So hopefully this time by saying that, I don't just kind of jinx in a way that this game is not even going to be close and that one of these teams is going to walk out of the semifinal and make it to the final with an emphatic win. But I feel like this could be a game where it could go to a penalty kick shootout, which, again, I said this before about games go to a penalty kick shootout, and they didn't even go to a shootout in that. But if this does go into a penalty kick shootout, I will say the Timbers have the upper edge because Steve Clark, he's already been in a PK shootout, and that he is a very good penalty kick stopper compared to Andre Blake, who is not a bad penalty kick stopper himself, but he's definitely not as good as what Steve Clark is, and that's why I'm going to give the Timbers the upper edge if this game go to a penalty kick shootout. Now, if this game doesn't go to a penalty kick shootout, then I have no idea who's going to win it. Like, it's all going to depend on who's going to pick the right moment to score their goals throughout this game, and that, of course, will be the winner of this game and move on into the final of the MLSisback tournament. But that being said, moving on into the next match is none other than the Adrian Heath Derby between Minnesota versus Orlando City. This, of course, is actually the fourth meeting of both of these teams and the fourth annual of the Adrian Heath Derby. Minnesota, of course, won 4-1 against the San Jose Earthquakes, while Orlando City won 5-3 on a penalty kick shootout against what was supposed to be the favorites in this tournament, LAFC. And you could maybe argue that was probably one of the biggest upset we have seen so far in this tournament. The last three head-to-head match, as I said, this is the fourth meeting between both of these teams, so both of them only have played 3 times before. But it was Minnesota and Orlando City both played to a 1-1 draw in the prior meeting. Then it was the Loons winning 2-1 on the road against Orlando City before, in the first ever Adrian Heath Derby, it was Adrian Heath current team, Minnesota United, able to win 1-0 against Orlando City. So it's pretty clear that Adrian Heath has got the best out of his previous team, which is why that is probably maybe one of the reasons why I'm going to go with Minnesota in this game. And again, this is not because I'm a Loons fan and the fact that I'm being a little bit I'm going to be maybe a little bit biased in terms of picking Minnesota wins this because I want to see them into the final. But I also feel like one of the reasons why I picked the Loons to win in this game is that Adrian Heath really wants this. Like, I know in the previous last 3 head-to-head meetings, Adrian Heath definitely have got the better of his previous team. But this is probably the game that really matters, and that in a semi-final like this and a trip to get to the final of the MLSisback tournament and just one step away from earning the first silverware in club history, that he definitely wants to get the better of his old team. And I know before there's been kind of the talks about how he still has feelings about his old team, and that whenever he faces against Orlando City, it isn't really like facing another team because of so much history that he has with the team and so much history in terms of the facility that we are playing in this MLSisback tournament. Because if you remember when Orlando City, before they came into the league, they used to play in the same facility that the MLSisback tournament is there. And it's probably no wonder why Minnesota has been very good, and no wonder why Adrian Heath has been very good in this tournament, because when he was with Orlando City and playing in this facility, they were a very good team, and hence maybe that's why Orlando City is very good throughout this tournament too, because they're used to playing in the facility that they used to call themselves home back in the USL days. But the other reason I will say is that Minnesota so far throughout this tournament has defied a lot of doubters, and in some way defied most if not all logic that I have with this team, because coming into this tournament, I thought at best the Loons is probably going to just sneak in as the best third place team in this tournament, because with the announcement of Ike Opara not coming into this tournament, and we know how big Ike Opara is to this team, I have a feeling we're not going to do very well. And yet they finished second in the group and move on into the knockout stage. Then when they face against the Columbus Crew, who at that time everybody thought that was the best team in this tournament and that they are clearly the favorites of making to the final, we knocked them out in the penalty kick shootout. And then in that Blues Knot derby, when the Loons was pretty much down, a little bit down in terms of the attack, with the way that Romain Métanire is not going to be available in that game, and I have no idea whether or not if he's going to be available in this game either, which from what I heard, probably not, because I have heard that he hasn't really practiced with the team, so most likely we're not going to have him in this game too. But even in the last game, when I thought that our attack was depleted, and that how in the world are we going to score a bunch of goals against a Quakes team that have also scored a bunch of goals? They scored 4 goals against the Quakes, and probably could have scored more if they were a little bit more clinical against the Quakes in that game. And that, yeah, I mean, they have really defied a lot of doubters, and in some way defied my expectation of how they would be in this tournament. Whereas, Orlando City, I will acknowledge the fact that they are a very good team, and that this is definitely a team that I think we can know. I know a lot of people call them the Cinderella story, which maybe that's a little bit connection to the Disney tournament that they are in, but I also feel like it's getting to a point where they're not really a Cinderella team anymore, but they're a team that can really be a team that could challenge for winning this tournament. And the only issue that I will say about Orlando City that I'm a little bit nervous about heading into this game for them is that can they still have those magic pixie dust of moments in the latter part of the game where they're able to rescue a resort to either go to a penalty kick shootout or get a crucial 3 points. Because in the last game against LAFC, just like the Portland Timbers against FC Cincinnati, they were on the doorstep of actually exiting the tournament, and that, from what I saw in that LAFC game, I thought that was not going. Orlando City was not going to get that equalizer, and just out of nowhere, they were able to get the equalizer and send it to a PK shootout and eventually winning that. Well, that of course is a good thing to do. Is that going to be something that's always going to happen? Probably not. And this is why I talk about how are they running out of that magic pixie dust, where if they do get into a situation where they're down in the game and they need a goal late in the game, have they used up all their magic left? And not to also mention the fact that Orlando City throughout this tournament, they still have the issue that's been plaguing this team for the past couple of years, and that is finishing. Because if they don't finish in this game, and they don't be clinical against a Loons team that I know they're gonna definitely score goals and able to create something out of nothing, then yeah, you're not gonna probably move on into the final. So that being said, I'm gonna pick the Loons to move on into the final, but I'm also hoping I didn't just jinx the Loons by picking them, and also wearing my Minnesota United gear just so that hopefully they can move on into the final, where they might face the Portland Timbers in the MLSisback tournament final. I mean, so far, some of the predictions that have been made throughout these knockout round has been pretty good. I mean, in the last round, I think I got 2 out of 4 of my prediction right? So it's not like I've been a person that have jinxed a lot of these teams whenever I pick them to basically move on into the next round. But that being said, 2 out of 4 is not perfect, and you know that those 2 teams that I picked to move on into the semifinal probably would want to have a word with me of them just jinxing them moving on into the semifinal. But yeah, that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of both of these games and the prediction for both of these games and who is actually going to be moving on into the final of this MLSisback tournament. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.